I think I'm gonna make it all the way. You hurt me and abused me, took advantage of and used me. I swear it almost made a wreck of me. When I needed your devotion, you were never in the notion. You were cold as any iceberg in the sea. Love to you had lost its splendor. My pride went out the window, but now my heart is healing, and I got a real good feeling. I think I'm gonna make it all the way. It had been over a year since my wife started her affair with Howard Paddington. I had no idea why I allowed it to go on as long as I did. Perhaps it was because I was comfortable. After I figured out what was happening, I didn't really care anymore. I patiently waited for the day when she would serve me with divorce papers. I hadn't done anything to prepare myself other than to get into the proper frame of mind. I was resigned to the fact that she would take half of everything I had accumulated with her. She could gladly have the house and furniture. The appraised value was less than the mortgage now. We had just enough money saved to prepay 4 years of college for our daughter, Jenny. In 3 more years, I would have vested rights with the company, and she would probably claim part of that. Marcia was fairly discreet about her affair. The biggest problem was that Paddington worked for the same company that I did. He was in a different department and at 1 pay grade higher. At least he was single and fairly good-looking. What I didn't like was his arrogant attitude. It was easy for me to avoid him at work, and the only time I was forced into associating with him was at company social affairs. Things came to a head quite quickly. Jenny had left for her first semester at Penn State, and Marcia and I were alone in the house for the first time in 18 years. Normally, that would have been a good opportunity for a couple to start increasing their sexual activities, but not in our house. Marcia was always too tired or too busy, and I couldn't care less. It was a Saturday morning. Marcia was in the shower, and I was still reading the morning paper when the phone rang. I was not expecting a call, so I just let it go to the message machine. It was an interesting message, to say the least. "This is Malcolm Jewelers calling. The engraving has been finished on your watch, and you can pick it up at any time. Thank you." Well, that was interesting. I don't wear a watch, and I never had. It bothered the hell out of me to have something hanging on my arm. There was no reason for Marcia to have something engraved on her own watch, and Jenny used her cell phone to check the time. I had never been one to root through my wife's purse or anything else, but today I felt a strong urge. The receipt from the jewelry store was tucked in the side where she kept her credit cards. I read it carefully. 1 Teg Heuer Carrera wristwatch with a black alligator band. Engraving on the rear, "Forever Marcia, $3,900, paid in full." I carefully tucked it back in place and got myself a cold beer. I knew damn well that it was not for me. Marcia had just returned to the living room as I was walking outside to start mowing the lawn. It took twice as long as normal to finish the yard work, but I had a good chance to think things through. After lunch, Marcia informed me that she was going to spend the night at her sister's house in Frackville. She didn't notice the big smile on my face. I got to spend the rest of the evening getting my affairs in order. I had a whole year to do this, but I had waited until the last minute. I was kicking myself for delaying it, but was glad that I had finally made the decision. She got home about lunchtime on Sunday. We were congenial but hardly spoke to each other. It was the longest Sunday of my life. I slept on the couch that night. Monday morning at work started out fine until Howard started showing off his new watch to all of his workmates. I had resigned myself to put up with it all until he glanced my way with a big smirk on his face. Up until that point, he had always been laid back and quiet about the affair, but now he was gloating. Big mistake. I immediately took a week's vacation and then notified personnel that I was now available for a transfer to the Baltimore office. The new job came with a promotion and a pay raise. I had declined it several times because Marcia and Jenny did not want to move. I spent the rest of the day at the bank and with my lawyer. I put together an offer to give Marcia everything, but no alimony and no percentage of my pending pension. She could have all the money that was left after we prepaid Jenny's tuition. With college costs as high as they were, there was not going to be much left. My wife was not at home when I moved all of my things into a small, efficient apartment near work. On Tuesday, I rested. The divorce papers were delivered to Marcia on Wednesday. She called me. "John, do you want to explain this? Do you want to discuss anything?" "No," I replied. "Why should I sign these papers?" she asked. "Marcia, it is long overdue and you know it. Signing the papers will just make everything right. I am the one getting the short end of the stick. You lose nothing and gain everything." "You are offering no support. I gave you 20 years and you offer nothing," she replied. "If I included alimony, it would only be until you remarried. Seemed to me that it would be a waste of time. As it is, everything will be over in 90 days. If you want to change things, I can guarantee that it will take over a year. I just want to move on." "I understand that you are actually moving?" "Oh, and who told you that?" Of course, I knew the answer. "Does it matter?" I replied. "At this point, no." There was a pause in the conversation. "Marcia, I am the one who got hurt here. I am the one who is being forced to move. I did nothing wrong, and still I am the one being punished. I've known all about Paddington for several years now. Just sign the damn papers." "I am sorry, John. I never meant for this to happen. I will get them to the lawyers tomorrow," she replied. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to lay a guilt trip on her, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. I went into work on Friday and cleaned out my desk. Nobody had expected to see me, and several people voiced their objections at not being able to set up a proper goodbye party. I wasn't in a party mood. It took less than an hour to out-process. Before leaving, I called Jenny and explained the situation as well as I could. "How do you tell your daughter that you are leaving her mother without giving a good reason?" She asked once, and then dropped the matter as if she had some idea of what was going on. I didn't see how it would have been possible for her not to know, since it was for so long. I got the feeling that she understood. The drive to Baltimore was a sad one. All I could think about was the life that Marcia and I had built, and how easily it was destroyed. I had always planned on growing old with her. Now I had no plans for growing old. I didn't really care. At no point had Marcia apologized for her actions or even admitted them. We avoided the subject. Naturally, we both knew what was going on, but neither of us would be the first to actually bring it up. A man could drive himself nuts thinking about all of this crap. I turned on the radio. Who the hell is Lady Gaga? The new job was a piece of cake. I was overqualified to say the least. Because of my competence and confidence, the people under me felt comfortable. It was going to be a good move. I kept in touch with Jenny, and she gave me what information that she had about her mother. Howard had moved in with Marcia into our house. A week after I left. Jenny was not happy, and I couldn't blame her. Marcia had signed and agreed to all the terms on the divorce. She didn't even get her own lawyer. Everything was right on schedule, and all I could do now was wait. When we reached the point where there was only 3 weeks left until the divorce would be final, I signed up for a 10-day Caribbean cruise. I hated cruises, but this one would be necessary. The weekend before I was scheduled to leave, I met some old friends from home in Atlantic City. I wined them, dined them, and entertained them. It was good to have old friends. It was a long 10 days at sea. I couldn't decide what I hated most, the food or the others' guests. At times, I could swear that I was being stalked by at least 3 single women. At least I thought they were single. I took advantage of all of the ports of call to break up the tedium. When I finally got back home, I had some guests waiting. They were Baltimore detectives, but they were there at the request of the Pennsylvania State Police. Howard Paddington's body had been found at a roadside rest area on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. He had been beaten by what appeared to be a baseball bat and died on the way to a local hospital. His wallet and watch had been taken, so the first indication was that it had been a robbery gone bad. When investigators uncovered the relationship between Paddington and Marcia, I became the prime suspect. It took less than 30 minutes for the local police to verify that I was indeed on the cruise for the last 10 days. The Pennsylvania State Police did not feel that any further research was necessary. There were at least a dozen messages on my phone. Jenny had told her mother about my cruise plans, but Marcia insisted on trying to get in touch with me. Marcia knew that I hated cruises. One of the calls was from Jenny, so I called her back. "Jenny, I just got back from my cruise. What the heck happened?" "Nobody knows for sure. Mom is a wreck. Howard didn't come home from work one day, and that night they found him on the turnpike near Downingtown. He had been beaten and died before they could get him to the hospital." "When did this happen?" "Last Thursday," she replied. "Well, I was in Cancun last Thursday, so it wasn't me. Mom swears that you had something to do with it, but there is no proof at all to verify it," she answered. "I just spent a good bit of time with the local police here, and they seemed to be satisfied with my story." "So why is your mother trying to get in touch with me?" "She is totally lost. She doesn't have you, and now she has lost Howard. She said something about trying to stop the divorce. Can she do that?" "Not without my approval. If I had waited a few more days, I wouldn't be having this problem." The next week was filled with phone calls from Marcia and from an attorney named Winstead. I ignored them all. 2 days before the divorce would be final, a certified letter arrived requiring my signature. My secretary was able to delay the delivery so that I had a chance to exit the building. I spent the next 3 days in Atlantic City. Before going home, I called my lawyer. He congratulated me on successfully avoiding Marcia's attempts to stop the divorce and then asked me for $10,000 more to cover expenses. After a few awkward moments, he started to laugh. It was a crappy little joke, but it did add a little levity to the situation. Instead of the money, he said he would settle for a steak dinner. It was worth it. I still thought it was a crappy joke. I never fully understood why the police had dropped the investigation into Paddington's murder or why they had not contacted me again. Jenny called and also offered some congratulations, but of course with the reserve that a child would have in seeing her parents separate. Marcia was in a deep depression. Her sister Sherry was staying with her for the time being. It appeared that she suddenly realized that she was going to be having financial problems. Severe financial problems. I was smiling as I hung up the phone. I had no contact with Marcia for the next 2 years. I didn't keep track of her or check up on what she was doing. I talked to Jenny every month, but we both carefully avoided any discussion about Marcia. All I knew was that she had lost the house to the bank and was working in a ladies' clothing store at one of the local malls. Marcia did tell Jenny that Howard had 2 insurance policies naming his mother as beneficiary. Apparently, Mother Paddington was not willing to share. I had had a few dinner dates, but nothing of a romantic or sexual nature. Later that year, Jenny announced that she was getting married in June. I had met the guy several times and was very comfortable with her choice. The wedding was going to be in Harrisburg, his hometown. Of course, Dad was going to be footing most of the bill. I was more than willing to help in any way that I could. The prospective groom had far more family than our side, so it all made sense. I agreed to go and give away the bride if Jenny could assure me that I would not be seated near Marcia or have to socialize with her in any manner. She reluctantly agreed. I did not want to ruin my daughter's wedding, but I felt that if I was forced to have contact with Marcia, the chance of a disruption was more likely than if I simply avoided her. Other than getting a tux, there was one more thing that I had to do to prepare for the wedding. I was feeling devilish. Or should I say, my mean streak erupted. It was a beautiful wedding. Aren't they all? Jenny kept her word. Things were carefully arranged so that Marcia and I could avoid each other without appearing too obvious. Although I was alone, Marcia was escorted by a good-looking fellow who was about 50 years old. I never did find out what the relationship between them was. He could have been a working associate, a neighbor, or her new boyfriend. I didn't really care. At the reception, Marcia and her escort were seated at the far left side of the head table, and I was on the far right. I patiently waited until it came time for the father of the bride to offer a toast. As I stood up to speak, I crossed my fingers. It was a silly little prank, but I still wanted it to go off as I planned it. I am right-handed, but today I was holding the glass in my left hand. The words coming from my mouth were unimportant, but my gesture to the room was. As I raised my left arm, my tuck sleeve slid down, exposing a beautiful Teg Heuer wristwatch with a black alligator band. I held my arm up longer than necessary so that the exquisite timepiece could be seen by everyone in the room. A sudden gasp from the far end of the table told me that my mission had been accomplished. I spoke a little longer than I normally would have, just to rub it in a little. When I sat down, I had a big grin on my face. Marcia had seen the watch and she had recognized it. All the planning had paid off. A few minutes later, I saw my ex-wife and her escort leave the room. She was upset, but I couldn't tell if she was crying or not. I hung around for another hour like a dutiful father, and then quietly left and went back to my hotel room. I slept uneasily that night. I wasn't sure what Marcia would do, or if she would do anything. If she did nothing, then I would know that she was resigned to her fate and ready to move on. If she was still bitter about what happened, I might be getting some visitors. The answer came at 6 a.m. "Mr. John Terrell?" There were two of them, in dark suits. I got a sudden vision of Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones on Independence Day. I was laughing to myself as I answered. "Yes. How can I help you?" The dominant suit identified himself and his partner and then asked to come in. They were not local, but from the state attorney's office. I was wondering who got them out of bed this early in the morning. I motioned for them to sit as I put my pants on. I had expected them, and I should have been dressed before they got here. There were only 2 chairs in the hotel room, so I sat on the unmade bed. I purposely took more time than necessary to get comfortable. "What can I help you with, gentlemen?" I asked. "You are the John Terrell who was at the Peterson-Terrell wedding yesterday?" "Of course. Jenny Terrell. Now Peterson is my daughter," I replied. "We received a call that during the reception you were wearing an expensive Teg Heuer watch." I reached over to the nightstand and picked up the oversized timepiece. "Yes, I was wearing this watch. Do you like it?" "That's not important, Mr. Terrell. What we would like to know is where you got the watch." "Why?" I asked. "Can you just answer the question?" "No. You tell me why you want to know where I got it and who informed you that I had it, and I will answer your questions." "Mr. Terrell, we are trying to make this as easy as possible. Could you just answer the question?" "Okay. I got the watch on eBay. Now you tell me why you want to know." "A watch exactly like the one you are holding was taken off of the body of a man killed in Downingtown 3 years ago. I am sure that there are a lot of watches similar to this one. Can you be a little more specific?" I asked. They were a little uncomfortable. I got the feeling that they were getting ready to just drag me off to a government building someplace to finish the conversation. "Mr. Terrell, do you know a man named Howard Paddington?" "Of course I do. I used to work with him, and he is the man who had an affair with my wife, which incidentally caused my divorce." "Mr. Paddington had a watch exactly like that when he was killed." "How do you know that?" I asked. There was no reply from my 2 visitors. "Did he have the watch on him when he was found?" I asked. Both of them shook their heads no in unison. "Do you think that this might be his watch?" I asked. They were supposed to be in control of this informal interrogation, but it looked as if they were losing it. "Who the hell told you that this was Howard Paddington's watch?" I asked. "Your wife, Mr. Terrell. Your wife identified the watch." "And how did she know that this was his watch?" I asked. There was a slight hesitation. "She claimed that she bought it for him." "Maybe you should be talking to her?" I asked. There was no reply. "That's it? That is all you have to go on?" I asked. "There is an engraving on the back of the watch that will verify her claim." "Can she prove that she bought this watch?" I asked. "She had a receipt." "Hell, I have a receipt also. Here, let me show you." They sat quietly as I removed a folded piece of paper from my wallet and handed it to them. The top guy looked from the paper to me. This is from eBay. It says here that you bought the watch for $49. Yeah, but I had to pay $5 for shipping also. You bought a Teg Heuer watch on eBay for $49? Not exactly. Look close at the description, I replied. They were both looking at the description and did not notice the big grin on my face. It says Tig Heuer, not Teg Heuer. Here, look at the face of the watch. Suit number 2 studied the watch face carefully as I held it out to him. He turned to his partner. It says Tig Heuer. Gentlemen, did my wife buy a Teg Heuer watch for Mr. Paddington, or did she buy a Tig Heuer watch for him? A look of frustration came over both of their faces. Things were not going as they had planned. Can we see the back of the watch, Mr. Terrell? You want to check the engraving? I asked. Yes. Do you mind? No, not at all. I handed them the watch so that they could examine it at their leisure. I had made my point. I was putting on my shirt when they both got up to leave. Sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Terrell. Have a safe trip home. I closed the door after they left and looked down at the watch. I was glad that I had spent the extra $20 to have the back of the watch engraved. I flipped it over and had a laugh as I read the old English script. Eat shit and die. It would have been just as easy for them to check the serial number of the watch, but there wouldn't have been nearly as much fun in that. I drove back to Baltimore, knowing that my wife was still bitter about how I had handled the situation. I guess I can't blame her, but I was hoping that there would have been a little remorse on her part. I was upset because she was still looking to hurt me or to get even. She was the one who cheated, not me. Maybe it was about time for me to get even. I threw the Tig Heuer watch out of the car window and reached into the glove compartment. You could tell the difference just by the feel. Before fastening the real thing on, I read the inscription for the 1,000th time. Forever, Marcia. I hated wearing a watch, but maybe I could get used to wearing this one. I'm gonna make it all the way, just like old Blue Eyes said. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I hate giving a backstory, but I realize some of it is necessary to tell the story I want to tell. What I look like, what Stephanie looks like, that isn't important. Use your imagination to fill in those blanks with yourself and the love of your life. Stephanie and I found each other mutually attractive. What happened was not based on looks. It's a story about love. I'm married to Stephanie. Others called her Steph, but I never did. I found that name beautiful. She also called me Robert, even though everybody else called me just plain Bob. Our pet names for each other were our formal names. This part becomes important later. My hobby is astronomy. I like looking at the stars, as well as the planets in our solar system. I have an assortment of telescopes. Some people have a lot of guns, some people have a lot of vinyl records, and I have every telescope I ever bought. I get the new ones just like anyone who likes the latest version of things gets the newest one. If you'd have asked me a few months ago if anything was wrong in our marriage, I would have told you, fuck yeah. Something had seemed off recently. Stephanie and I had been married for 3 years. We were discussing the right time to have kids. We had a wondrous moment when we both decided it was time. For 2 months, it was all we talked about. And then, she suddenly didn't want to talk about it. Our sex life, which had been frantic with the excitement of baby making, didn't go back to what it had been before. It became more of a ritual. It wasn't cold. It seemed to be mutually satisfying, but the intensity wasn't there. Then, 3 weeks ago, the intimacy just stopped. I assumed it was because of female problems I could never understand, or the fact she was having second thoughts. Both of my theories were wrong. I returned after work at my usual time. Nothing really tipped me off for what was to follow. There was no strange car in the driveway. There was a strange one parked on the street, but I didn't realize that part until later. I walked in to see my wife and a man I'd never seen before on our couch. I would normally refer to it as the couch, but what I saw is the reason I describe it differently. They were sitting together holding hands. This was unusual. Stephanie usually let me know whenever someone was dropping in. I was hoping this was some distant relative I'd never met. "Hi, honey. Is someone joining us for dinner tonight?" Stephanie said, "Robert, please take a seat. I've got something to tell you." I took a seat in the chair across from the couch. This was weird, but I wasn't assuming it was the one thing it looked like. Not until Stephanie spoke again. "Nigel and I have fallen in love." Well, that removed all doubt. I was silent for a moment, processing this. While I was doing that, she looked over at the strange man. She was looking at him in the way she used to look at me. He was looking at her the same way. There was no doubt she was telling the truth. I had just one question, so I asked it. "Who the fuck is Nigel?" The person who I assumed was Nigel spoke. "I am. I know this is awkward for both of you. I'm just here to ease the pain of this disclosure. This is painful for her." Obviously, easing the pain meant only Stephanie's pain. My pain wasn't eased at all, so that didn't exactly help. Stephanie spoke next. "I met Nigel at work. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened." I really thought I was calm when I said, "How does something like this just happen?" Nigel asserted himself and said loudly, "Don't raise your voice to her. She is an angel." Stephanie stared deeply into his eyes and said, "Thank you, Pookie. I'm here for you always, Pocahontas," she replied. I was stunned. It was like having a concussion. I used to play rugby, so I used that word from experience. What I was feeling was the equivalent of a knee to the head. I was completely disoriented. My next words reflected that. I once again kept my emotions suppressed and said in a conversational tone, "Maybe there is a way we could work this out. I've read stories about women who can be in love with two people at once. There's this romantic story where a woman is in love with two men. We should read that together before any rash decisions are made." Nigel jumped off the couch. "Quit yelling at her. Stop torturing this wonderful woman." Stephanie grabbed his hand and pulled him back to the couch. "Thank you for defending me, my knight." Then she kissed him. A small peck on the lips that would have previously meant nothing. Then she looked at me with a mixture of compassion and sadness. "I can't love two men. That's not for me. I can only give my heart to one person at a time. I fell out of love with you as I fell into love with Nigel. Can't we talk about this?" "We could go into counseling," I replied. Nigel was clutching her hand when she responded. It would just drag out the pain. "Robert, my heart knows what it wants. I still have love for you and I always will. I just don't love you the same way anymore. A clean break will be the easiest for both of us. But we were planning on having kids just a few months ago. I don't understand." Stephanie looked at me with all the compassion in the world. "That's why I have to do this. I want children to be conceived in love." Nigel spoke again. "They'll be our love babies." "Oh, Pookie," she replied. Then they gave each other an Eskimo kiss. I really didn't think they could have done something more nauseating if they had tried. I was about to speak when Stephanie looked over at me and spoke first. "Robert, I know this is hard, and thank you for being so supportive during what I know was a painful moment for you. I'll be back later to pick up my things, and I really hope we can talk as friends." I was still wondering how my calm demeanor somehow was interpreted as supportive while they both got up and left. I certainly wasn't supporting any of this. I guess they had said what they had come to say, and I was an afterthought. Nigel got into his car and she got into hers. It was the practical thing to do, of course, since she needed to take her car. Still, I don't think I could have handled seeing them leave in the same car together. I've always considered myself blessed with a very good memory. That night it felt more like a curse. I was replaying everything Stephanie had said to me over the last 6 months. I'd never heard of Nigel. I had no idea who he was. She had fallen in love with someone else and had an affair, and I never had the slightest clue. How had I missed it? There certainly had been the signs I mentioned earlier that something wasn't right. Now I could put those things in context. She'd fallen out of love with me. That explained the changing sex. She'd cut me off completely the last 3 weeks. I concluded that was around the time she and Nigel had consummated their mutual desire. She had said she could have only one love at a time. That was when she likely gave her heart and body to him. I was still trying to process everything when I got the call from the hospital. Stephanie had been in another car accident. Yes, another. Stephanie always had a lead foot. A year ago, she'd rear-ended someone on her way back from work when traffic had come to a sudden stop. She was physically fine. She was emotionally shaken up. She'd lost consciousness when the airbag deployed. She wasn't even hospitalized for that one. This one was more serious. She was taken to the hospital because she was unconscious when she was discovered by the EMT. I was told she'd run a red light at full speed, then swerved to avoid an oncoming car. She'd wound up driving into the side of a Jack in the Box. That information had come from Nigel, apparently. He certainly didn't phone me and disclose that. I got that information from the staff. I was still processing everything when Nigel approached me. Yeah, he was there too. He'd gotten there before me, but I hadn't seen him until then. He didn't express mutual grief or offer what would have been an unwelcome hug. He didn't say anything like, "Hey," or "let's talk." He just went to what was on his mind. "Bob, I can't see her since I'm not family. You know she was leaving you for me, so I'd appreciate it if you let me in. You have to approve it. I'm technically not family, but I am her family." Technically. Given that approach, I gave my response. It was easy. No. If I was you, I'd let her go. I'd be looking to move on. "Let me comfort her," he answered. "No," I answered. "Are you really going to be an asshole at a time like this?" "Yes," I replied. With that, I turned my back on him and walked toward Stephanie's room. He was definitely right. I was being an asshole. I didn't feel bad about it at all, not even a little bit. I barely had time to deal with the hurt when Stephanie announced she was leaving. I hadn't even had time to get to the anger stage. After seeing Nigel and listening to him, grief was turning to anger now. I couldn't very well lash out at my wife after she'd been in an accident, so being an asshole toward Nigel would do nicely for the moment. I needed answers, and I hoped I'd get them. Until I did, Pookie was not getting anywhere near her. The fact that he felt pain was a bit of a balm to me at that moment. I was intercepted by Dr. Beller. He looked the part of the wise and experienced doctor. His gray hair gave me comfort that he was a fountain of knowledge. He told me my wife likely had amnesia from what he was able to tell. Otherwise, she was physically fine, just like the last traffic accident. Mentally, though, this one was different. Outside of soap operas, I had no idea what that really meant. What I learned from television was I should whack her on the head again to bring her memories back. I soon learned that soap operas shouldn't be treated as medically accurate. Dr. Beller was very doctor-like in dumbing it down for me. She has retrograde amnesia. I didn't know there were different types. There's also a version called anterograde amnesia. People who have that can't make new memories. Have you ever seen a movie called 50 First Dates? I have. It's actually a criminally underrated Adam Sandler movie, I replied. All Adam Sandler movies are underrated. We'll have to agree to disagree on that. No point in pissing him off, he was her doctor after all. So if she doesn't have that kind, what kind does my wife have, I asked. She has the kind more people have some familiarity with. She can't remember anything after a certain point. She will still make new memories. Is it permanent, I asked. It rarely is. Usually memories do return. It's extremely rare that they never do. How long does it take for them to return, I asked. It varies. It could happen this week. It could take a year. It could take longer. So at any moment she could just suddenly remember everything, I asked. That's a possibility. It could also happen that she begins to remember certain things but not everything. She gradually remembers more and more things. So what you're saying is, you really have no idea what's going to happen, I asked. That's what I'm saying. Also, you should give the Waterboy another chance. Adam Sandler is a comedic genius. I will. Apparently anybody can become a doctor these days. So much for putting faith in gray hair. I was let in to see my wife. She was awake and alert, as well as confused. Robert. What happened? The doctors tell me only I was in an accident. I grabbed her outstretched hand and she gave mine a squeeze. I squeezed back. What's the last thing you remember? I was coming home from the office. The car in front of me had stopped, but I didn't hit the brakes in time. Her memories seemed to go back to the accident a year ago before this. This was pre-Nigel, from what I'd gathered. It was also interesting to me that her memories returned to the other accident. Had she suffered some serious injury then as well that the doctors hadn't detected? Or was this a coincidence? These were thoughts to discuss with the doctors another time. Or not. Right now I was in the moment. Stephanie, you got into another accident the day you left me. I left you. Why would I ever do that? She replied. You told me you were in love with Nigel. Nigel? Who the fuck is Nigel? She answered. He's someone you know from work. I don't know anybody from work named Nigel, she replied. That was interesting. Either Nigel was new there or she had lied to me about how they met. Look, I don't want to agitate you. We can talk about this another time. You can't just drop a bomb like that and not talk about it. My first thought was, that's exactly what you did to me, you harlot. There was no point in saying that or walking out to spite her for something that she didn't remember. I took the high road. Barely. I told her the story the same way I'd heard it from her. She interrupted several times and came close to accusing me of lying. She couldn't seem to wrap her head around anything I was saying. Once again, that's exactly how I'd felt when she and Nigel declared their mutual love to me earlier that day. She was filled with questions I couldn't answer, like, "Were you cheating on me?" "No, Stephanie, I never have and never would," I replied. "Did you beat me or something?" "Same answer as last time," I replied. "Then why would I do this without any reason?" I kissed her hand. "Stephanie, just recover. We have time to talk about this. I'm glad you're okay." Stephanie was kept in the hospital for a few days while the doctors ran tests. I was there every day after work. So was Nigel. Every time I walked in, he would say something like, "Bob, can we talk?" "No," I replied. "Bob, you know that." "No," I replied. Stephanie eventually was cleared to come back home. Both of us were briefed about what to expect. Stephanie was fine both mentally and physically. Her memories were likely to come back, possibly slowly, possibly all at once. I'd heard it before. She'd heard it before. At this point, Stephanie just wanted to go home. I wanted that too. So we nodded and agreed and signed forms without reading them, just to get the fuck out of there. As we were nodding and signing, Dr. Beller mentioned she could go to work, but her lack of memory could make it difficult. He suggested she might want to take a different job in a similar field. I simply said, "Thank you, Dr. Beller, for all you've done. We want to go home now." 5 minutes later, we did just that. We slept comfortably in each other's arms that night. I didn't want to let go of her. It was like having a piece ripped out of me that had suddenly been restored. I never wanted to lose it again. I slept more soundly since this whole thing started. When I awakened, we were still intertwined. While I did breathe easier when I had my beloved safe and secure under our roof once again, it doesn't mean I was completely at ease. From what Dr. Beller had said, this situation could change at any time. I wasn't sure how big a window I had to come up with a permanent solution, but I had a second chance here and had no intention of just wasting it by doing nothing while the clock ran out. There were deep philosophical issues to consider, of course. Things like, if Stephanie could fall out of love with me so quickly once, did I really want her back? Things like, should I look a gift horse in the mouth? I've never really been into philosophy, so I ignored those thoughts and concentrated on the task in front of me. I needed Nigel out of the picture before I could figure out anything else. That problem was difficult enough. Stephanie wouldn't consider leaving her job. She loved her job. She was also good at it. She'd called her boss and explained the situation with her memory. Her boss was sympathetic and welcomed her back. She told her she'd make it work. I was supportive of her returning, however. I still knew nothing about Nigel. A lot of affairs start at work. From the little I knew, so had this one. This was definitely going to be an issue if he really was someone she worked with. If Nigel was a co-worker, she'd run into him again. If he was, there was the possibility he'd worm his way into her heart again. She did go back to work despite my reservations. It seemed she had been honest with me about how they met. Nigel was indeed a co-worker. Stephanie told me she got a nice welcome back reception. Everyone seemed to want to do everything they could do to assist her. They had all been informed of her memory loss. Only one person had made her feel uncomfortable: Nigel. His way of welcoming her back was different. He kept wanting to talk to her alone and kept breaking physical boundaries she was not comfortable with from a co-worker, much less a stranger. She had gotten plenty of hugs, but Nigel was the only one that sniffed her hair. Stephanie told me she drew boundaries very quickly. He didn't seem to have gotten the memo. He kept wanting to hold her hand or put his arm around her. All this did was piss Stephanie off. The company where she worked didn't have any kind of non-fraternization policy for co-workers. Fortunately for me, it did have a strict sexual harassment policy. I realize I did say, fortunately for me, I still wasn't ready to think. Fortunately for us, not yet. Nigel got summoned into a meeting by Human Resources and was given the usual company lecture about the policy and told he needed to cease and desist. He also got reprimanded by his supervisor and told he needed to cease and desist. Nigel neither ceased nor desisted. The first thing he did after his dressing down was to confront Stephanie in full view of a lot of witnesses. Instead of talking, he grabbed her and started kissing her. I assumed he'd been expecting muscle memory or something to result in her kissing him back, rather than the slap that followed and the kick to the groin. Nigel was fired for cause. That didn't end him trying to see her. He showed up in the parking lot at work. He showed up if she left to go to lunch. It got so bad she got a restraining order against him. This did a lot to alleviate my concern that the affair might be rekindled. It's hard to have sex from 500 feet away. I did enjoy seeing my wife's paramour suffer. I also enjoyed resuming the relationship with my wife I thought we'd always had. Stephanie was back for the moment, but I knew that could change if her memories returned. Even if they didn't, would something in her nature cause her to suddenly feel the same way about another man? One night I was looking at the stars on the balcony with one of my older telescopes. I did that from time to time because I liked thinking of myself as Galileo and wanting to see if I could see what he saw. I could not have drawn the conclusions that he'd drawn, but I wanted to be able to. When I got frustrated, I pointed the telescope at the neighborhood, as I have often done. Damned if I didn't see Nigel in the bushes. Stephanie came out on the balcony and asked what I was looking at. I just told her to look into the telescope. Whoa, that is some serious creeper shit. Should I call the cops? Oh no. He wants something to watch. Let's give him something to watch. What do you mean? I want him to see me make love to you. I want him to know you're mine. He'll see you and I naked. You told me he already has. No, just you. I don't think he's ever seen me naked. Then it's time he did my hunk. I want him to see what he can never hope to compete against. Let's let him see something from me he will never get or see again. Let's show him two people in a love that can't ever be equaled. Talk about pressure. It should have been difficult for me. It wasn't. Her enthusiasm was contagious. Hell, it was hot. It had been years since our foreplay had been that intense. We kissed, petted each other lovingly, then kissed again and again. At this point, I had no idea if Nigel was still watching. I hoped he was. I also didn't care. We both were in the moment, enjoying the touches and tastes of each other in a way we hadn't done in years. We started slowly, both of us knowing we were being watched. Soft touches with our mouths and fingertips. Soft murmurs of approval. Nigel screamed. Nuhu, we should have our babies. Our babies. Apparently, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for Nigel. He chose that moment to burst from concealment. Pocahontas, please stop. I love you. At that point, we were no longer paying attention. I wanted nothing more at that moment than to have an orgasm. By the look on her face, she wanted the same. I can always tell when she's in the moment. She never looks at me. Her eyes go everywhere else but looking at me. Nigel, realizing his words were barely heard, decided to make a non-verbal statement with action. That statement was made by crashing through our glass door. He really could have just pulled the door open. It wasn't locked. I supposed he wanted to waste no time finding out. I like to think we both came when we heard the glass shatter. I think we both came at the same time. I didn't even bother to get dressed and raced downstairs. Despite what we see in the movies, it seems that throwing your body full force into a pane of glass doesn't leave you unmarked. Based on the screams, it seems it's also painful. Nigel was one hell of a mess. He was halfway in and halfway out, struggling to extricate himself from the glass. I grabbed his hand and yanked him in. He screamed again. His clothing was ripped and his exposed flesh had lacerations all over. Rather than thanking me, he yelled, "Get your hands off me." I wasn't even touching him after I pulled him in while he lay prostrate on the floor. He really seemed unappreciative of the fact he was bleeding and making stains. The area was tiled, but it still would have to be cleaned up. I called 911. At that time, I thought it was a medical emergency. Nigel looked like he'd lost a fight with a chainsaw. After the conversation with the 911 operator, though, I did realize that I was also reporting a crime. I also lived in a city where reporting a crime could result in the person reporting the crime being arrested or shot. Let's just call that city Baltimore. This was one of those situations where I might have been handcuffed and spent a night in a cell because the police just arrested everybody on the scene and let the judicial system sort it out. 2 policemen arrived. One was a fairly large and impressive guy. The other was a smaller woman that gave me the feeling you wouldn't want to fuck with her. While both Nigel and I were told to get down and stay down, Nigel once again tipped the scale in my favor. While we were both in the process of being cuffed, he yelled out to Stephanie, Pocahontas, "I'll be back to save you." The larger cop was Officer Whitecloud. That's all he and his partner needed to hear. I did hope he'd be promoted someday so that he'd eventually be Chief Whitecloud. As the dust settled, the court decided that Nigel had violated a restraining order. He'd also been guilty of breaking and entering on top of that. Nigel was going to be out of our lives for a while. It didn't hurt when Officer Whitecloud took the stand that he mentioned Pocahontas in front of the most liberal judge who could have presided over the case. Did I mention the judge was also a woman who hated stalking? I wanted to kiss her at that moment, but didn't want to push my luck. Nigel went to jail. Oh, not forever. He got a sentence of 2 years and served 3 months. That was still an unexpectedly harsh sentence. He was now a felon. That would put a crimp in his future. He finally seemed to have gotten the message because there was no further communication from Pookie. That was one problem out of the way. There was still the ticking time bomb of her memories returning. I selfishly didn't want that to happen. Given how she now thought about Nigel, I don't think that would have been good for her either. Still, we had to go toward the future prepared for it. I had no doubt if it ever happened we'd be together. I also had no doubt it would be a complication we didn't need. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.